I've played Pokemon since the very beginning, and even now, every couple of years, I still get those moments when I see a move used on me and I go, wait, that's a thing? I think that's one of the best things about Pokemon. There's so much to learn, no one could ever truly know it all. So, welcome to the first in maybe a series, a celebration of those Pokemon moves you've probably never heard of. Today I'll only be counting the first 5 generations because I feel that's where moves started to become easily missed. Oh, and by the way, this is not a list of bad moves. A move can be obscure for lots of reasons. Some great moves are learned only by weak Pokemon or just not any Pokemon that can be obtained without transferring. In other cases, a move is awesome for competitive, but learned by 0 Pokemon in a main story. Then in other cases still, they can be good, but just outclassed and not played because of the specific Pokemon they're on. If they were on something else that didn't have better moves, they might be played. However, some moves really do just suck. So let's get started on what I think is the worst pick here. I've warned you. Bestow. You give your held item to a target that has none. It fails if the opponent already has a held item. Items are powerful. So basically any Pokemon in Versus or even a challenging boss fight is gonna have some good ones. You could just steal that good item while forcing something bad on the enemy with Trick or Switcheroo. Any item trickery is given back to their respective owners after a trainer battle, but after a wild battle, nope. Then barely any Pokemon even learn Bestow. It's a whopping 11 as of Generation 5, and most of them suck. Sorry to begin on something so hard to listen to. I did warn you. Let's move on to our next category. Moves that are useless in single player, but quite good in competitive. First off, we have Quash. My first reaction to hearing this is, what the hell is even a Quash? Is that like a rotten vegetable or something? Yeah, I know, squash. On your turn, you target a Pokemon and you make it move last, but this move does not have priority, so you must outspeed the target anyway in order for it to do anything. It's such a bizarre move to spend your whole turn on, and it has 0 use cases in single battles. Murkrow and Honchkrow were originally the only Pokemon to learn it through level up, and this is only barely expanded over time. More Pokemon learn it through a TM that can only be bought with BP, and I'm willing to bet you didn't spend such a precious currency on that. So, okay, Murkrow is pretty good. It can benefit from Eviolite, and it even has Prankster when Honchkrow does not. This is a move that saw later competitive success thanks to those factors, so I'm willing to bet plenty of you do know this move. I think this one's easily forgotten by non-competitive players because it was introduced in Generation 5, and yet no Generation 5 Pokemon can even learn it. It was introduced to us as a massive waste of BP. Ally Switch, another useless move in singles. The user switches places with one of its allies, but fails every time if the user is alone. Only Kadabra and Alakazam could originally learn this move unless you, again, buy a TM that's locked behind BP. And even then, only 6 more Pokemon could be added to that roster of compatibility, making it near useless. Every now and then this shows up in VGC, as its pool has thankfully expanded over time, and it's an interesting move, but in its debut, it was nearly non-existent. Despite its successes, some see it as a risky use of your turn to swap places and do nothing else when you can just switch into a different Pokemon and keep all 4 move slots. It's dependent on having a team built for it. 2 Pokemon that would always be covering each other, and one of them happens to be one of the few that gets this move. Our next category is moves that have had success after Generation 5, but started out kind of obscure. Final Gambit. You instantly faint, and your own HP lost is dealt to the enemy as damage. Notably, insta-fainting does not count as damage and cannot activate items like the Focus Sash. You're just dead. If it fails, you won't faint from using it. It's prominent on Staraptor in competitive play after this and has shown up at Worlds multiple years. I just didn't realize it was introduced in Black and White, assuming that it must have been an X and Y introduction until I replayed Black and White years later, and I was stunned that a high-level wild Basculin used it on me. In this game, it was learned by only 12 Pokemon, and a lot of them are pretty bad. The ones that aren't, you wouldn't see in competitive formats at the time. I feel like it's just remote enough in this specific game without transferring that it could have easily gone unnoticed. Stored Power. I think you have heard of this move if you've been playing the modern games, but I didn't know it existed this far back. It was only learnable by Clefairy, Natu, Ralts, Victini, and Munna. Through breeding, we can add Eevee, Cleffa, Togepi, Chingling, Woobat, and Sigilif. It's a 20 power special psychic type move, but that power increases by another 20 for every stat buff the user has, maxing out at 860 base power. Still didn't do much. Not a practical move in regular battling at all, but an interesting idea that I kinda like. It finally became useful after 10 years thanks to Terra raid battles. So a lot of these things are only obscure if you're a specific type of Pokemon player. Maybe you didn't play past Gen 5, maybe you're not into competitive play. Now we move on to our category of signature obscure moves. All of these are either bizarrely outclassed by common moves that lots of other Pokemon get, or are frankly a pain to learn. First off, we got Night Daze. 85 power, 95% accurate with that power, special dark type attack. It has a 40% chance of lowering the opponent's accuracy, learnable only by Zoroark at level 64. Zoroark was originally an event Pokemon, so yeah, pretty unusual. It makes the list due to the high level and because it's kind of a toss-up whether you would want to use this better than Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse is the exact same move, but it's 5 less power in exchange for 100% accuracy and a 20% flinch chance. Plus, Zoroark learns it a whole lot sooner than it learns Night Daze, so I think you're probably gonna pick that almost every time. Fiery Dance. The dance that Volcarona is less known for than Quiver Dance. Volcarona learns this at level 100, doing 80 power fire damage with a 50% chance of raising its own special attack. Learn it. You won't. It's not horrible. Basically, it's better Charge Beam. It's just hard to justify a precious move slot to on Volcarona. You'll have Quiver Dance for 50 levels by then, which is a much better buffing move. And Volcarona's got Heat Wave for doubles, Flamethrower for singles. It's pretty redundant and just not worth it over 3 other great moves that it learns. Blue Flare. 130 power, 85% accuracy, and a 20% burn chance. It's basically better Fire Blast. I'm willing to bet most haven't seen this actually used in a video game because it's a second signature move for Reshiram and learned at level 88 or 100 depending on which game you're playing. Modern day, I think almost no one would use a vanilla Reshiram instead of transforming it into White Kyurem. And even then, most players won't get that high of a level for any reason. Levels are just set to 50 in multiplayer and other easily obtainable moves are just a lot more reliable. Bolt Strike. It's the same move as Blue Flare, just electric. Paralyzes instead of burns, and it's physical somehow. Learnable only by Zekrom at level 88 or 100 yet again. I feel like this is better than Blue Flare, largely because a good physical electric move is more seldom than a good special fire move. I kinda like this one. Psy Strike. They finally gave Mewtwo a signature move, and it only took until Black and White. This one is Psyshock, but with 100 power instead of 80. Actually an awesome move that's still used in competitive Ubers today. I just feel like unless you were a hardcore fan of Uber's meta, you wouldn't have a reason to care that Psystrike exists. First, you almost always have to transfer Mewtwo into a specific game to get it, and then it has to get to level 100 in order to teach it. The only other way to get this move at all was through events. Pretty cool stuff, right? Now we move on to the weird. This is the stuff that I've been looking most forward to. Moves that do something that no other move does, and let's just get to it. Starting with Reflect Type. I'd never even heard of this one until doing research for this and trying to find moves I didn't know. With this move, you become the target's type. I don't like the name. I prefer the Japanese name of Mirror Type. Our name sounds like a counterattack and not just a simple type change. Learnable only by Staryu, Mew, and Latias. Perhaps the most fitting move for Mew to know, where its gimmick is just being everything all at once. Guard Split. Averages defense and special defense stats between the user and the target. I could kinda see this perhaps getting some use in doubles to give an ally survivability against a threat. Maybe, but it's so remote. Only 10 Pokemon learn it in all, and so it's dependent on your opponent having something your specific Pokemon is afraid of, and that Pokemon playing well off of another member of your team, which just so happens to be those 10. Its full pool of users is Shuckle, Baltoy, Latias again, Yamask, LGM, Abra, and Shelmet. Other than Latias and Abra, it's Slowpokes who wouldn't get to act early in a turn either. This move is not priority. Power Split. Or not. Maybe. Yes. Same move as Guard Split, but for attack and special attack. Learnable by all the same Pokemon, except it's Latios instead of Latias and Mr. Mime instead of Abra. Kinda odd, as I thought blocking was Mr. Mime's thing and attacking was Alakazam's thing. Sort of backwards from what I would have expected. This also means that Shelmet has been on this list 3 times now. Sadly, this move sounds a lot better than it actually is. Buffs do not count for either Power Split or Guard Split, so it's only going to buff your default stats and probably not give that much help to an ally. Simple Beam. A move that's probably been used on you by a high-level Wild Audino once. But if it weren't for Audino being the training fodder of this world, and if you didn't play the post-game, this is a pretty remote one. It's learned by 8 Pokemon. There's the aforementioned Audino, LGM family, and Genesect. Through breeding, there's Zigzagoon and Skitty. Frankly, all these Pokemon are either off limits or they're freaking terrible. Now we've saved the best for last. We end on a pair of amazing moves that you've likely not seen used. Storm Throw. A physical fighting version of Frost Breath. It always criticals. Only learnable by Throw and Pinsir. I knew about this move because it was on a personal favorite card of mine in the TCG, but besides that, yeah, I thought it was a TCG move and not a game move for a few years. And Searing Shot. 100 power, 100 accuracy, special fire type move with a 30% burn chance. That's incredible. It's an arguably better Scald. But only Victini learns it, and at level 63. It's a move you would never see unless you downloaded the launch event for Black and White and played the whole game with it. You wouldn't even necessarily know about this move in playing competitive. Victini has another signature move, V-Create, which is just better Searing Shot. Yeah, 2 signature moves on the same Pokemon that are basically the same, but one of them's worse. Awesome move, but one of the lamest cases of a move having terrible distribution. Heck, most Victini events give it to you already knowing V-Create, and you'd have to work for Searing Shot. It was like doomed on arrival despite how many other Pokemon wish they could use this move. And as of 2023, none of this has ever changed. It's an awesome, useless move. I have to say, I think this list illustrates just how many moves there are that change the rules of a battle. The game appears super simple on the surface, like you're just taking turns and hitting each other one at a time, and for most players, it is. But there's so much planning that goes into all the ways a Pokemon battle can play out. Even if most players will never use some of these more sophisticated moves, they still gotta program this stuff. And I think it's kind of impressive that we don't get more move-related glitches than we do. I couldn't imagine having to logistically answer all of these questions of what happens when this move is used on the same turn as that move while this ability is in effect and the target is this specific type. And to do so in a way that doesn't infringe on another of those thousands of similar questions. And not to mention, just doing it in the name of giving people creative license so that they may or may not use these moves. Or players might not realize there is a good strategy involving that move until years in the future. It's happened before. Stuff like Dive Cats was not discovered until the end of Generation 5, but it was there all along. Maybe someday I'll cover some later generations. Gen 7 in particular has a ton of moves that I'm sure a lot of people haven't seen due to the sheer number of Z moves, and even Sword and Shield has some Gigantamax moves no one uses that never appeared in any other game and probably never will. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.